This week on Substitute Teachers Lounge, we begin a 2-episode series. The title of the first is Teachers Are Better Than Substitute Teachers. And guess what the title of next week's is going to be?
Substitute Teachers Lounge.
Yes, we will be talking about why teachers are more important than substitute teachers today. Let me just mention before we start, though, this is episode 150 of Substitute Teachers Lounge, which really means absolutely nothing. In fact, last month, for the first time on the Apple Podcast Review, somebody left a review that said one man's opinion, and it was the first review that I got less than a 5. It was a 3, and I respect that person's opinion. I'm not here to say anything about that. Ironically, the 3 episodes now, after he left that, is one of the highest 3-episode series or 3 weeks in a row that we've ever had. So I'm starting to think, I'm not even sure if the reviews on Apple Podcast really mean that much. Nevertheless, it could mean things eventually. So I would encourage you, leave, not so much, you don't even have to leave a review, just a star rating will suffice, and do that. And I'd be happy to hear what you have to say about it. I know what a lot of you have to say about it because you share that on the Substitute Teachers Lounge group page, and we have a lot of good discussions on there. Teachers, they are more important than substitute teachers. Here's how, okay? Now, I don't want to keep regurgitating the thought that I've quit long-term substitute teaching, but I have. This week, I'm only going to do about 2 days, maybe 3. Then I don't really want to do long-term sub anymore. Now, I will say this, once people know, once you build up your reputation and people know that you're a good sub, the instant, it wasn't even a whole day. It was within hours. I was already getting calls and texts from other teachers. Would you fill in for me? So I appreciate these teachers. Here's why I appreciate them anymore. Let me get this out of the way first. I'm going to second that thought. I'm going to hold that thought till next week's episode because it applies more there. So this week's episode, teachers are more important than substitute teachers. Now, before you get caught up in the whole philosophical argument of everybody is important, we're all in this together. I think I have just as much to offer as a teacher, whether I'm credentialed or not. Yeah, well, okay, go with it, run with it. I'm proud of you for standing up for that. This episode, I'm going to tell you why teachers are better than substitute teachers, okay? Now, this past week, I subbed at a middle school, and they invited me. I usually don't eat lunch. I usually start my eating later in the afternoon, generally speaking. I can do the intermittent fasting thing, which probably is, of all the diet ideas you've had in your life, it's just another way to keep you organized. It seemed to have worked best for me, and I said all that to say this, that number 1 episode now has returned to the very first episode I ever recorded that said something to the effect of, all right, I'm a substitute teacher, now what? That wasn't the exact title. I didn't bother to look it up. But for weeks now, for months now, almost a year as a matter of fact, the episode we did with Jen Stevens about intermittent fasting in the school system, she's a teacher, that was number 1 forever. I'm happy to say, nothing against Jen Stevens, I still love her book. Go out and buy it, Fast Feast Repeat. I'm proud of the fact that first episode is now back in first place. There are a lot of people still listening to this. That means there's a lot of people listening to the podcast, and they want to go back, pick up some of the episodes. It's kind of funny. I'm really digressing, but one of the teachers that I talked to a couple of weeks ago, I've taught for her several times, but she didn't know I had a podcast. Then she started looking up, and she was saying, man, Greg, I want to listen to all the episodes. And then she came back in and she said, you've recorded 145 episodes? How long have you been doing this? And I was proud of that. And I understand if you're a new listener, thank you, welcome, leave a review, all that good stuff. Am I expecting you to go back and listen to all 150 episodes? Of course not. Now, I can tell you, and you already know this, I can tell you the most popular one is the first one. The second one is in the top 5. And then just about every episode we've had about having problem students, about spanking. We didn't spank, by the way. You'll have to go back and listen to it. All that kind of stuff, those are in the top 10. So those are your favorite episodes. Now, teachers, here's what I told those teachers this week. They invited me in to lunch. As I mentioned, I didn't eat, but I just talked, which I have a habit of doing. And I told them, it all centered around, I hadn't been to that school for a while. One of the teachers brought up, she said, Greg, I know I don't know you that well, but it's so exciting to see our kids excited about you being back in the building. And I'm proud of that too. I'm glad those kids say that. I'm glad that that's what makes substitute teaching so enjoyable. We have a good enough relationship. I'm happy to see them. They're happy to see me. But then the conversation just kind of moved around, and I said, I've given up long-term subbing. I only sub one day at a time. And here's why. I said, you teachers, you've got a lot of responsibility. And I was honest. I said, and I don't want that. I'm not in that for the responsibility. I want to just come in, interact with the students, carry out your lesson plans, and really nothing more. Now, how did I come to that conclusion? Let me back up. From my quitting episode a few weeks back that I told them, and truthfully so, that I wanted to spend more days of my retirement. I wanted to have Mondays off. I wanted to do various different things. I wanted to travel. They didn't ask me this, and I didn't put this in the email to them. And maybe I didn't even know it myself at the time. But when I went back to one day at a time, that meant I didn't have to grade anything else. I didn't have to post any more grades. I didn't have to load assignments every day. I didn't have to convert paper tests over to Google tests, which I enjoy, but that was just a different level of responsibility. I've been given full-time jobs where I've had those responsibilities for weeks and weeks at a time. One time for an entire year. That year, I had 3 different classes to teach because I had 7th grade math, 6th grade math, and 7th grade computer applications. I love them all, love the students. But man, I'm retired. That was more responsibility. So the first reason why teachers are better than substitute teachers is the responsibility. They have so much responsibility. Let's get sugary for a moment. It's kind of ironic. I don't listen to the news, but I was flipping through channels and Biden was talking, and I hope you're a billionaire. I really do, but he's trying to tax you guys a lot more. He said that teachers and firefighters pay a higher percentage of their income to the government than billionaires do. He's trying to put an extra tax on billionaires. If we had a calculation where we ranked responsibility versus pay, teachers would definitely be in the lowest spot available. In the firefighters too that Mr. Biden was talking about, all that. They have such a responsibility. The sugary part is to say they're in charge of our kids. They're in charge of handing out attaboys. They're in charge of understanding why this particular student is upset today and may not do well on the test. They're in charge of trying their best to motivate students in their classroom that really have had no reason to be motivated at home in their entire lives. That responsibility for teachers is so high, it's off the charts, really. Teaching is a labor of love. Okay, all the sugary stuff over, at least for the moment. So teachers have more responsibility than substitute teachers. It doesn't give them the right to look down on us. I've never run into anyone who does. Maybe I've thought that a couple of times, and then I got to know them. Who knows? Maybe they were waiting for me to say something. I've noticed that in students. If I haven't had certain students for months and months, and I expected them maybe to come up to me and say something, and they never did, it kind of bothered me at first. And then I realized, they were waiting for me to say something to them. They wanted to be remembered. They didn't want to come up to me and risk me saying, "What was your name again?" So I try my best to go out of my way to walk up to students I've had before. And if I don't remember their name, I'll have to fess up. I'll blame it on old age. I'll tell them that I call my own kids by the wrong name sometime. Most of them I do remember, though. They held a special place in my heart. So teachers have more responsibility than substitute teachers do, just in the way they have to go about their business. Teachers are better than substitute teachers because they never have any free time. Does that make sense? A substitute teacher, generally speaking, at the end of the day can go home. I've even seen some of them, if you get lucky enough that your planning period is the last period of the day, and substitute teachers really don't have that much to do in that planning period. So, maybe it's okay to sneak out a little bit early. I'm a volleyball referee. Maybe I need to get ready for that game. Maybe that's okay. If you've got a good reputation, if you've got that leverage, they'll probably let you do that, even though they're paying you for it. Now, if you get in the habit of coming in at the last minute and leaving at the first minute, well, then you might not have that reputation. But teachers never have any free time. Here's what I'm saying. You think they have a planning period? First of all, do you really think that 50 minutes to an hour in a day is going to be long enough for them to grade everything they have, come up with new assignments, come up with disciplinary procedures for whatever might be going on, keep up with medical type issues that they need to be aware with students, and they have to keep up with that because most of the time that 50 to 60 minutes is really zero, because I've witnessed what happens during the teachers' planning periods. Other teachers drop in, share stories. Students will be saying, "I need a little help with this. If this teacher lets me come in during your planning period, will you help me with this?" The answer, I've never heard a teacher say no. They have the responsibility to say yes. That planning period, I'm not sure it ever materializes for a teacher. Now, what happens when we as substitute teachers go home? For the most part, we might think about kids that we'd have that day that we may have in the future, but basically it's over. You don't have to go to any of the ball games if you don't want to. You don't have to think about how you're going to deal with that student the next day if you don't want to. It can basically be over with you. It is never over for a teacher. In fact, I know from being married to a 5th grade teacher who is now retired that there are students that come up to her in stores everywhere we go that talk about her being their favorite teacher, and they loved having her for a teacher in their class. Maybe they're in their 20s now and they still remember her as a teacher. That's because teachers are never allowed to flip that switch off. They always have to be on. They always have to respond to emails. Now, from my advice, we had the episode about respond to emails when you're home. Don't be so stubborn that you want to wait until the next morning because then you'll be overwhelmed. Turn on a football game. Turn on a Netflix show, turn on whatever you like to watch. Answer your emails while you're watching the show. You can make it as much of a relaxing environment as you can. With teachers, they never turn that off. They may have to deal with emails and issues while they're sitting at home. They may have to go to bed late grading tests. They may have to get up early because they realized a situation may develop during the day and they have to be prepared for it. So teachers not only are better than substitute teachers in responsibility, and I know you guys are getting aggravated with me using the phrase better than. I'm doing that to just prove a point and to link the two episodes together, okay? So don't get too torqued up about it. But teachers are better than substitute teachers in responsibility and in lack of free time. After the school is over and you went home, they have to stay at school a lot of times. Have you met very many teachers who aren't involved with something else for the school? I'm trying to think through my head right now. Most of the teachers are coaching something, are organizing an activity, are coming up with games and activities to play during a fun night maybe. And especially, I shouldn't say especially, but principals, athletic directors, their jobs aren't done until late at night. They start early in the morning. They end late at night because they have to be at all the ball games and after school activities. They have to be there at the beginning of the school for the special get acquainted events. Substitute teachers don't have to be there. They don't have to be there for the activities. Now, the better substitute teachers, yep, I said it, the better substitute teachers will do some of that. They'll go to the activities. You know, I kind of go by default because I see a lot of the volleyball players, but I've gone to basketball games on my own. It's funny, one of the middle school basketball games I went to because I kept promising that I'd go, they actually said something, not in a cheer, but they yelled out my name from the floor and waved at me sitting in the stands. They were happy that I was there. Well, I chose to do that. A teacher can't choose to do that. They have to be assigned to those activities. Maybe they're selling tickets. Maybe they're working concessions. Maybe they're cleaning uniforms. Maybe their school duty that day. You think they work just 8 to 3? No, they have to be there early to watch the kids get off the bus, stand in the hallway to make sure none of the students get upset with anything. They have to do all those things. Maybe their job is to stay late, do the same thing. Teachers are better than substitute teachers because they're never allowed to flip off the switch. I have been married to a teacher. You know, she taught, I guess, 26 years, something like that. Guess when we always took our vacation? It was either during spring break with all the other crowds or during the summer with all the other crowds. They didn't have a choice. Another reason why teachers are better than substitute teachers, they'll take their vacations when they're told, whereas everybody else can take them when they want to. They have to take them at the busiest times. That means they then have to spend the most money. The already underpaid teachers have to vacation at the most expensive times. The theme parks are more. The airlines are more. The hotels are more because they know they can get that money because they've got you in a bind. There is nothing else they can do. So teachers are better than substitute teachers because they take restricted vacations. They take it when the school tells them they're allowed to take it. Now, along with that, you'll hear them complain, but they won't complain much. There's nothing they can do about it. They have chosen that profession, and they're doing it for the love of those kids, and they are determined to be the best teacher they can be, regardless of how they're treated. Now, that sounded more negative than I meant it to, but they are able to accept that responsibility. They are able to take the vacation when they're told, and they are willing to give up their free time so that they can be a teacher. Are teachers better than substitute teachers? Yes, they are. Not better people, better at the job they've been assigned. So we can complain all we want about how I think I'm just as good as a teacher. Teachers are better than substitute teachers.